I get those goosebumps every I get those goosebumps every time you come around. Girl. You ease my mind, you make everything feel fine. Worry about those comments, I'm way too numb, yeah. It's way too dumb, yeah. I get those goosebumps every time. I need the hype, throw that to the side. I get those goosebumps every time, yeah. When you're not around me, throw that to the side.
Yes, the Richie mute
He's-
effect is in
He's
full
on
flow.
mute. He's on mute. I was thinking, what's going on?
I can't unmute. Oh,
It's
there you
done
are.
it
You're
again, hasn't
muted.
it? It's done it again, hasn't it? There we go. There's the first laugh and cock up of the night anyway. So, but look, everyone, welcome to Loaded Mag NUFC special on this Sunday night. A jam-packed Sunday night, in fact, because obviously this is the first of two live shows tonight, because we do go live with a Away Days AC Milan special at 9:30, which I'm sure that Pete will tell us a little bit about later on in the show. But I'm joined by Daz and Pete tonight. Lads, how are you both on this Sunday night?
All good, Richie. All good. Richie, I'm rocking the Irish Mags top tonight, representing the lads. It's finally got slightly cold enough to wear it, so I said I'd give it a wear tonight.
Yeah,
All
that's
good,
I
Richie.
bet I'll be getting plenty of use over the next 6 months or so.
Sure will.
Pete, how are you, mate?
I'm great. 3 points in the bag. I ain't had one of these weekends for a long while, so I'm enjoying it. I'm not going to lie. Would there be an opportunity for me to get one of those Irish mags? I do have a little bit of Irish in me going back through sides of the family.
The
Does that
DNA
qualify?
testing, we'll see.
Does
We'll
that
see. And if you move
qualify?
over, Pete, we
Well,
can
it was
organize.
actually my granddad. It was actually my granddad.
Ah,
Who's
okay.
part Irish. So yeah, it's
I'll talk to the lads.
yeah.
We'll see what we can do.
I want to join the club. No, it's a great top, by the way. But I'm good. I'm good, Richie.
Good. Now, the guest we've got tonight is no stranger to the Loaded Mag NUFC. He's been on it a few times before. Everyone loves his content in it. But obviously, football fans has gone, berserk over the recent years and, decades and stuff like that. Just an interesting one to prove how much it's got weird. The guest tonight put this tweet out, and it's in relation to Newcastle and when we broke the world record for Alan Shearer. Now, obviously, at the time we paid 15 million 27 years ago when we bought him for Blackburn. And obviously, the story after that's, unbelievable. But in today's market, obviously, he'd be worth 235 million, in today's money, which is just, it's just staggering how much it can change. I can still remember the day Alan Shearer signed. I don't know, both you might be able to do that as well. So it's
worth
just
every
staggering.
penny. Even if it was 235 million, worth every penny.
It was, yeah. So, when you say stuff like this, you know that you want to get someone who can, get through all the greyness of all football fans and try and make it a bit more black and white, as we like it to say it. So, once again, I'd just like to welcome back Mr. Kieran Maguire from The Price of Football. How are you, Kieran?
I'm grand, thanks, guys. Thanks very much for inviting me back. Good to see so many smiles on your faces after this weekend as well. It's amazing what a result can do.
Yeah,
you wouldn't want to see it 2 weeks ago.
I was about to say we might as well get the elephant out in the room out the way. So Brighton, fantastic start of the season. I don't think you probably would have expected to have a start of the season like that. Unfortunately, we were at the wrong end of a drubbing just before the international break, and then you've went to Old Trafford yesterday and had a fantastic result there. And I believe you were at Old Trafford as well for it, Kieran. So it was even better for you.
It was. I mean, I've been to Old Trafford on many of occasions because I lived in Manchester for 40 years. So I go and watch United in the City if I was doing now. But yeah, we Brighton put out a team which cost £17 million. The starting 11 cost £17 million. So I think it shows that football, money helps. You know, and without it, I'll be out of a job. But spending it smartly, and I think that's what Newcastle have done. Because if you take a look at Everton, for example, they've spent, their owners put in £750 million. And he's leaving now with his tail very much bigger between his legs. So it's a funny thing, money in football. We get very excited about it, and it's not always the solution, but it helps. It's like anything in life, isn't it? You can be happy when you're poor, and you can be miserable when you're rich. But it's easier to be happy when you're rich.
Yeah, it is. At least you haven't got the money worry sort of thing on that sort of front. But yeah, we did say that sweet. Yeah, we put it on there because it sort of links into where we're going to go, a bit later in the show as well. Just off the comments that Dan Ashworth's made in the past. But look, we'll get started straight away because obviously we know we've got you for a limited time tonight, Kieran. Obviously, it's much appreciated. And we want to start with basically when I think it goes back a few months when you made a tweet about the Forbes rich list in football, and obviously you put the diagram up as well with it, and it shows that I think it's Newcastle are 22nd richest club in the world. And you think it's not too bad, bear in mind what you look at, but then you highlight the point that 2 places valued above us is Crystal Palace. Now, obviously, you made a tweet about this online, and it got a bit of interesting responses to it. But the capacity of Selhurst Park's half the capacity of St James's Park. And we've qualified for the Champions League and stuff like that, and they're still valued as more than Newcastle. So, where's the logic in that, Kieran? To start with, obviously, you must agree. Don't agree with the Forbes rich list there as much as what we do.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about when some of these tables come out, because without being too rude to Forbes, because Forbes asked me to value a couple of clubs, by the way. So they'll phone up at either journalists or people in the industry and so on and come out with a number, and they don't tend to double and triple check it. So take some of those tables with a huge pinch of salt. Things like Transfer Market. The guys that run Transfer Market openly admit that their numbers, it's just the guesswork. What you've got is a load of spotty virgins in their bedrooms coming up with valuations of players, and sort of, they're playing FIFA, and their man brings them up a pot noodle for tea, and then they go back and say, "Oh, this player's really good on FIFA, so therefore I think he's worth another 10 million." And that's how Transfer Market, Capology, which comes up with the figures for the players' wages. Absolute nonsense. I mean, I'm fortunate that I do speak to some agents, I do talk to some people in the industry, and I think some of these issues should be private, but we're always nosy when it comes to football. Just take any of these things with huge doses of salt. There is no way that Crystal Palace, who I loathe, of course, as a Brighton fan, are worth more than Newcastle United. So any opportunity to have a little dig at my friends from Selhurst, and they are friends as well, because I've done talks at Selhurst, and Kevin, who I do the podcast with, he's a Palace fan, and pre-match we'll always go up and have a drink together.
Yeah, it did shock all of us, I must admit, when we saw those valuations. But, some of the things that may reflect those prices is what the situation Newcastle in before the takeover went through. And obviously what we'll do is I'm just going to briefly, I'll put these 4 slides up, and obviously you can just go over it briefly for where Newcastle were as a financial basis, from the start of the 21-22 season, when obviously we started with Mike Ashley in charge that financial year. Obviously, the takeover went from by the end of it. But obviously, it leads us into the rest of the show. So obviously, this is when the accounts got published earlier in the year. Obviously, there was the cash that they ended up on, and obviously the losses that Newcastle had incurred as well. over that period as well. The transfer figures, obviously, something we weren't ever used to having to deal with as a Newcastle fan. Over the mic, actually, it was transfer fees, but we actually bought players. And as you can see, because of the assets we already had, there wasn't much to sell, which we've still found out in this window as well, really. And then you go into the final bit here as well, where it goes, obviously, how much was still owed from player sales, obviously the loan to Mike Ashley and stuff like that. So what can you tell us of that financial statement that you took out of those, the figures when they were released, Kieran?
Well, I think 21-22 was a transformative year. Clearly, from your perspective of fans, it was the end of the Ashley era. And I've always said that I know that there is a huge dislike for Mike Ashley. He could have been a lot worse, but he wasn't good. And the reason why I say that is that he did lend money interest-free, but he didn't invest in the club. We saw that. I think I calculated the infrastructure spend of all of the Premier League clubs during the Mike Ashley era. And when you see Newcastle United spending less money on infrastructure than Brentford and Norwich and Burnley and all of these things, then it does make you wonder, why hasn't he put money in there? Because there was the opportunity. I think that was a lost opportunity. And you put up here these commercial revenues. Well, Newcastle United's commercial revenues in 2008 were also around about £26 million, as was Manchester City's. And look at Manchester City's, 15 years later. Now, I think we have to take Manchester City's figures, into consideration. Well, but is it? Because if you were looking for a commercial partner as an organisation, you want to be associated with success, and Manchester City have delivered success. They've got the Champions League. If I've got, let's say I'm selling water bottles, wherever it is, I want to be Manchester City's official water bottle partner. Well, if I've got the Champions League or the Premier League, or if I've got Pep or Kevin De Bruyne or Haaland next to my product, can you imagine the amount of additional eyeballs? So I find it strange. I think that's the politest way to describe that Manchester City are generating £50 million a year more than Manchester United, as far as commercial income is concerned. And that's not because I'm anti-Manchester City or pro-Manchester United. I'm certainly never pro-Manchester United. But I think we all acknowledge that there is a global pecking order. You've only got to look at Manchester United's a soap opera. The number of social media posts from their fans is huge. So Manchester City's figures seem a little bit high, but that's linked to the club's ability to generate trophies. Newcastle's is Newcastle United shouldn't be where they are in that table, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, I'm a teacher. I teach at university. For those people that don't know me, and we'd look at that growth, and you always say that the culture of an organisation is set by the people at the very top. And if I was lecturing, I would say, well, I look at these numbers, I look at the lack of growth, and and the conclusion that you would come to is the owner, and this is a technical phrase we use in business, the owner doesn't give a flying fuck about the commercial basis of the club, and that's ludicrous, because whether we like it or not, and it's sort of it's a relationship which, as fans, we're always slightly uncomfortable with, but we know that ultimately commercial income brings in extra money, which goes through into wages, which goes through into transfers. So therefore, it's beneficial to the club as a whole. And when the owner's not interested in that, you go, well, why on earth is that taking place? And then secondly, I think it's fair to say that that Mike Ashley, in his own right, is a brand, and he's a very toxic brand. He's not a positive. So as Newcastle, if I was a Newcastle United fan, I would boycott everything to do with Mike Ashley. And if I was a manufacturer or a service company, I would think twice about associating myself with with Newcastle United during the Ashley regime, because the fans might weaponize themselves and say, right, we're going to boycott my products. And I remember when Manchester United used to be sponsored by Vodafone. I refused to have a Vodafone contract, because I wouldn't have a sharp television, and that's what we like as fans, and that's the way it should be. But when your own fans are turning against the products, that makes things even worse. And I think that's where we were under the Ashley regime, and that's why the monies were so underrepresentative of the club's potential.
Yeah, and it sort of goes into, because obviously you did an article in The Athletic with Chris Waugh and George Culkin, I think it was just before the end of last season, and you got into a few different things which we'll cover here. And one of the things that was really important was the fact that Newcastle's wage to turnover ratio was at 95%, which is drastic, really, compared to it doesn't really allow you to do much full stop. And we know that there was a lot of dead wood on there in the squad, which were on really high wages and stuff like that. And especially the way that last season went for Newcastle. And obviously, yes, you didn't notice at the time of when the article was wrote. Obviously, we ended up qualifying for the Champions League. Obviously, the remit had to change. They had two different, as we saw during the Amazon Prime documentary, they had lists for which European competition they were going to fit and which targets. And that has to change, and you have to, go on different sorts of that. And then you also have the fact that they talked about the Anthony Gordon deal, which was quite expensive at the time as well. And it was, you really was a deal that they wanted to do, but it went through the roof. And, they'd already, as he's mentioned, it had 3 windows, had spent 250 million, but they've already said that's taken them to the FFP limits. But how important it was to get the Champions League qualification to provide a bit of breathing space, because we've also been able to get rid of the dead wood to reduce the wage bill. We're going to be able to get some people come in who would fit the wage structure but enhance the quality of the squad and stuff like that. And especially now we've got that Champions League place, Eddie Howe then looks for Premier League quality players or European top caliber players, which don't come cheap. But that was a really interesting article that you did with The Athletic, Kieran. And obviously, that's just a few of the things that we picked out on it. But it really, really highlights how important us qualifying for the Champions League goes, because as you then get into potential Champions League revenues alone, obviously you can see by this figure here, it says clubs receive 13.8 million. And plus, then there's the wins, and then the draws, and the prize money, the TV money, which is broken down into this bar graph here, which is from this. I think it was you published it on your
this
time.
This is Swiss Ramble. This is
you'd retweeted it, and it was fantastic how it shows the gulf. Well, in European football, full stop. Obviously, the one on the right there's West Ham for last season. This was taken just before the group stages finished at the end. Also, we were looking 10 months ago now, and obviously we know that West Ham would have got a lot more money off that because they went on to win that tournament. And obviously Manchester City, that's at the estimated earnings there at the end of the group stage. They went on to win that. They're staying there. I think it's roughly 85 million at that moment then time, and that's just at the group stages. So it's what impact is this really going to have on Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League, Kieran? Like obviously for this season, and hopefully going forward if they can qualify again in the future.
Well, I think worst case scenario, we're probably looking at £30 million, but that's assuming that Newcastle United do a Rangers, and Rangers lost all 6 games. So you win a couple of games, if you get into the knockout phase, it's building for the future as well. Because one of those things from the Swiss Ramble table is what we call the UEFA coefficient. And what UEFA do is that they rank each of the 32 teams, and next year it's going to be 36 teams. They rank each of the 32 teams based on their past performances in Europe. And you effectively get £1 million for each place you are up in the table. So Newcastle, because under Ashley, they didn't have European participation, they're going to be starting at the bottom. If they have a good Champions League, 2 things. First of all, they get more money, but secondly, their coefficient increases, which means they get more money the next time in Europe, and so on. I think this is an absolutely critical season for all of the and realistically, as much as I love Brighton, we ain't chasing a Champions League spot. We're having a few good games. Sorry,
not yet. It's going well though. so far.
Yeah, I'll
The
take it.
classic playing it down. The classic playing it down. Well played.
It's what we did last season, boys, wasn't it?
We did. We did.
No, I piled last week into. I got 400 to 1 on us getting relegated. You know, I'm a typical fan. Yeah, you're always a pessimist. Yeah, De Zerbi will be off to Juventus, and Ferguson will break a leg, and then I'm always like all fans. You're always slightly pessimistic.
Kieran, you wake up one morning and you have this buzzing in your ears, and you know what it is, and it kind of grows, and that's what happened to us in October. It grows and grows, and look, here we are now. Tuesday.
Well, I'm looking forward to the Amex on Thursday night, to something not dissimilar. Yeah, because we got our first European games. But next season, you showed those numbers there. Next season, instead of getting 14, 15 million pounds for pure qualification, you're going to get 29. And that's before the TV money kicks in, and that's before you're probably getting 3.5 million. And of course, every match at St James's Park, it's going to be a sellout. The commercial department, because it is the Champions League, and you've got clubs of the caliber that you're up against, they can effectively name their own price for the hospitality boxes. So you're probably looking at 3.5 million pounds per match from gate receipts, which is fantastic. The sponsors' bonuses will kick in because they've signed a deal with Newcastle, which was on the basis of playing in the Premier League. Now there will be bonuses for you playing in Europe, because ultimately, what are the sponsors looking for? The sponsors are looking for eyeballs, and you get eyeballs at the weekend. And if you're playing Bournemouth at home, I've got no strong feelings one way or the other against Bournemouth or Fulham or whoever it's going to be. But they don't tend to generate huge viewing figures. But if it's Milan, if it's Barcelona, if it's Bayern, as you go through, then you will get huge European viewing figures, as well as Asia, as well as the US market. And that means that your sponsors have to go and cough up more, which, more money in the box, more money for wages, more money for transfers, and you get into that virtuous circle. And I think that's where Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth and the people at the top of the club are looking to move Newcastle onto.
Yeah, it's obviously, I mentioned it before, we and obviously the lads know this really well due to the We Are Newcastle United documentary on Prime Video. I don't know whether you had a chance to watch that, but obviously because it was mainly about the commercial side of the club rather than the All or Nothing series that's been done. And obviously one of the things that was really highlighted was the fact that the poor commercial deals beforehand by Amanda Staveley. She commented several times on that during their that the Castor Kit Supplies had another 4 seasons with 6-year deal, and that was roughly worth 7 million annually, while Spurs, as a comparison at the time, were reportedly on 25 million a season with Nike. But obviously they also managed to get a loophole to get out of the shirt sponsor as well, with Fun 88 as well. That was estimated at roughly 6.5 million a year. Now, obviously Newcastle brought in Peter Silverstone, previously of Arsenal, fantastic chief commercial officer. We've seen that in the documentary as well, and we've already seen so far with some of the deals that he's been working so hard to boost that caliber. Now, as I was talking to Daz before you joined us in the green room, you look at the commercial side of it straight away, where it's getting taken. If you look at the sleeve sponsor that Newcastle had previously to Noon, was it with Kayak, and you also had Fun 88. You roughly look at 10 million a year for both of those. Now, with Noon, I believe if you look at the figures that were quoted here, 7.5 million asking price for that. And then you've got the seller deal that came on for this year as well. Obviously, it had to go through the make sure it was, it was fit and all above board because of the alliance with the PIF and seller being part of the PIF umbrella. So we've roughly gone up to 32 now. So it's over triple the amount that's coming straight away just by actually branding yourself in line with other teams in the Premier League. And that's, as you said, when those have been actually agreed, those were agreed before Champions League was guaranteed. So those figures are probably on the basic. So where do you think those figures will be now that Champions League have would it be an extra 25% on that? Or is that just something that's, it's a made up figure I've just come up with, or is it that realistic?
I think we are certainly talking millions. I've got to be honest, a lot will depend upon how far Newcastle United progress in the Champions League. Because if they get into the knockout phases, especially if they get into the further knockout phases, there will be step-ups with regards to every position. It could even be beneficial if you finish third and you go into the Europa League and you go far there, because again it's another 6-7 matches potentially that you're looking at there. So that there are there will be step ups. It's easy to play guessing games and come out with numbers, but I am literally be plucking numbers from the air. So I think the important thing is it's the direction of travel. The actual absolute numbers are irrelevant, because it's far more important for Newcastle to be in the Champions League next season. And if I'm honest, I think we're looking at 5 places in the Champions League next season, because if people aren't aware that the Champions League's moving up from 32 to 36 teams, and the additional 4 places, 2 are going to be given to where countries are as far as their champions. So, and they'll look to say, well, at present, Scotland get 1 guaranteed place and they get 1 knockout place because of their UEFA coefficients. So 2 are going to be based on countries' coefficients, and there's going to be 2 wildcard spots, and they're going to be based on the performance of clubs in this year's competition. Now, I know you don't want this to a certain extent, but actually it's really in Newcastle's interests for Manchester City and Manchester United, as well as Newcastle, as well as Arsenal, to do well, because the 2 countries who do best in this year's competitions, they pick up 1 additional place. And getting into the top 4, 7 into 4 doesn't work. As it's not. England's not like Spain. It's not like Scotland. It's not like France, where there's some clubs who are guaranteed a place in the Champions League. So 7 into 4 doesn't go. And if we're honest, the way that Manchester City are playing, it's actually not 7 into 4. It's 6 are chasing 3 places. If 6 are chasing 4, Chelsea are a basket case. I don't know whether you saw their match today. Trying to work out what they're up to is impossible. And I think it's a sign of the shambles at that particular club. We've just been talking about Newcastle's got a front of shirt deal. Well, this is Chelsea Football Club. They've won the Champions League twice, and they can't get a front of shirt deal. That's amateurish. So I think to a certain extent, they might turn it around, but there's already they got booed off the pitch today, and they picked up a point away from home and so on. So therefore it's 5 chasing 3, which isn't going to be easy, but it's going to be worth an awful lot of money next season.
Yeah, so obviously, it takes us into obviously us wanting to strengthen again next summer, and we've already known through the documentary that Peter Silverstone, they went away to Germany to speak to Adidas and talk about a new shirt manufacturing deal. It came out. It's worth roughly the figures are quoted at about 30 million. Is that about what you're hearing, Kieran? 30 million a year, which is obviously, as we saw from the Castor one. It's over 4 times as much as what it was for the Castor deal. And Adidas, obviously, they've got a fantastic relationship with Newcastle. Made our Gaduzzi said it felt like an old lover coming back together again, sort of thing. And it does feel like, and I think it was the one that the fans wanted. And it's potentially a commercial goldmine, because Adidas also do the retro range as well. And obviously that's sort of the best jerseys and trading gear that Newcastle ever had, and they can actually reissue it again, not off any of the copied brands, like Score Draw and stuff like that. These are going to be official merchandise, and this will all be money that goes back into the club as well. So obviously that's a fantastic development commercially as well. Obviously we know we've got to get creative as well, and one of the first sponsorship deals that was put out was our official energy drink sponsor. We followed on from Arsenal had Prime. We went with Monster, and we've discussed it's all these little things that it just brings more money into the club, and this is how Newcastle started to be really creative. But But I think the next thing is that I wanted to talk about before you, because I know, as I said, we know we've got you for a really short time tonight, and we appreciate it. There's two little areas I want to go on to quickly before we let you go, Kieran. Obviously, we've our partnership with Seller, our shirt sports, a Saudi entertainment brand, and they do all the big sport events over there, all the boxing and the Grand Prix, and they're part and parcel of Newcastle coming together with Stack brand and the old site on West Strawberry Place is on next to the metro station. It's going to be a bit like a box park. I don't know whether you know this, Kieran. It's good, obviously, but it's going to be Newcastle based. Now, our good friend Jordan Cronin obviously reported it this week in the Newcastle World, and then there was some CGI images put on there as well to see what it's actually going to look like inside there. Now, one thing that we don't know as fans, obviously, we're all looking forward to it. It's going to be a fantastic match day experience for home fans, away fans, and stuff like that, Kieran. But what sort of revenues is this going to bring in? Because obviously, it's not every club has these these fan zones and stuff like that. So, what sort of commercial revenue can we expect to come in from that? Do you have any idea of that, Kieran, at all?
Well, if we take a look at Spurs, I mean, I was at Old Trafford yesterday, and you followed Newcastle United home and away. When I went up to Manchester yesterday, I met up with my mates. We spent a couple of hours in the pub. We made sure that we got to Old Trafford at about 2:45 to 3, and we legged it straight afterwards. So we're there for 90 minutes. And when I was there, I don't even use the toilets, because everything about Old Trafford under the Glazers is tainted, in my view. But then I contrast it to Spurs. Now, Spurs make £800,000 a match from catering. That's 800 grand a match. That's more than some clubs make from their ticket sales. So it's more than the same. So more than Everton making ticket sales over the course of a year. And how has Spurs done that? Well, they've been innovative, and what they've done is that they've created an environment at their stadium. I've been there as an away fan. I don't know whether you guys have been there yourselves, whereby it's actually really nice if you get there early, because the concourses are wide. You've probably heard these stories about how they serve the beer, and it's that you've got glasses which have got a hole at the bottom and there's a magnet, and what that does is that you can actually fill up a pint pot 10 seconds quicker. But if you've got 60,000 people who are going to be at the ground probably for an hour and a quarter beforehand, they're still coming down for their 15 minutes. If you can serve 60,000 pints 10 seconds quicker, you add up those numbers, then you're starting to get more money coming through. And football's a really dumb industry, because you're open 25 days a year. The Apple Store isn't, Tesco's isn't. They're serving up 360 plus. So being able to get fans, if you can get 50,000 Newcastle fans, or even 20,000 Newcastle fans spending an extra hour in the fan zone, improving the concourses, doing an expansion to make it more acceptable, then the numbers start to tick up. And all of that is part of a much broader issue of maximizing your revenues, and through your revenues, you can afford the costs, because Newcastle can't afford to pay wages of 95% of revenue for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's not from a cash point of view, because we know that the owners physically have the money, but FFP is your constraint.
Can I just jump in on that? Because I think it's a really, really interesting point. Myself and Chris, we travel away games, home games, up and down the country. And we both went to a couple of years ago, Spurs away, in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. And that was the one game that I've been to in absolutely years where we had the vast majority of the away fans in really early, because normally they would go to the away pubs and all the rest of it. But they were in, and it's the exact point that you mentioned, is how quick they turn over the drink. And it's something that we don't catch on to. I think because we've got so many bars and pubs around St. James's Park, there's so many to go to, and people have their regulars that they go to. There's a big push right near kickoff. Everyone has their last pint just before, and then they jump in. But the problem we've had, and it's a separate conversation for another day, is with all the ticketing that's going on with the digital ticketing. We're having some problems getting fans into the stadium that is causing a mass pile-up. But having that introduction of just something like that that's so small, could make a huge difference because it encourages people in earlier, so it makes for that nice sort of transition into a game. But like I say, the newer stadiums are catching on to this, and Tottenham Hotspur are definitely one of them.
Yeah. I mean, and Newcastle were at Brighton a couple of weeks ago. I saw some of your lads after the match, and they said, "Well, yeah, okay, we didn't enjoy the result, but we were treated really well, and therefore, we did stay because Brighton always will have a local ale, they'll have a guest ale in the away end as a sign of respect for the away fans, and again, the clubs make more money. At the same time, you don't want the local pubs to lose out on their custom, but so it's a trade-off, because lots of people started going to those pubs and were staying longer at the pubs. Again, goes back to the Ashley era. You didn't want to give Mike Ashley a penny. Okay, you begrudgingly pay for your season ticket, but I'm not going to buy as much merchandise as I'd want. I'm certainly not going to buy anything, the catering products and so on. And that's sort of how the system worked. I think there is a different attitude under the new regime, in terms of positivity. And if they do improve the facilities, then I think fans will certainly buy into that.
Daz, I think you've got a question you want to bring, didn't you?
Yeah, I'll jump in with a question. I think it's a question that probably a lot of people want to answer. And I'm going to quote Mark Todd's question here in the chat. And it goes, does Kieran believe Newcastle are operating close to their full financial fair play budget, or are they just towing the line to keep the authorities happy?
I think that they do have some wiggle room. And I think I've said this to you lads before, but for all of the faults of Ashley, he left a legacy of a very positive FFP situation. The trouble is that does get eaten up fairly quickly. And I think whilst there is some wiggle room, Newcastle United are overspending, certainly in 22-23, and they did in 21-22. And that very, very quickly gets eaten up. And what you don't want to do is to be in a position similar to that of Manchester United, and we saw it sort of towards the end of this summer's transfer window, where the only deals that you could do were loan deals, because people say, hold on here, how can Manchester United be in such a mess? Well, Manchester United have got the biggest wage bill in the Premier League, despite being, not great. I mean, okay, they had a decent season last season, but they still had Ronaldo's wages, and they signed Casemiro and so on. And all of these players come in and they're on very, very lucrative contracts. And that meant that they had no wiggle room because they were absolutely rubbish at selling players. I think the biggest issue for Newcastle now is that when it comes to player trading, you've got to start to look at what's going out of the door and getting decent prices. And that's also helped by the way that the system works. If you take a look at Chelsea came in for a lot of stick over the course of the summer, but what they're very good at is selling players. And the sale of Mason Mount to Manchester United actually allows them, because of the way that the length of the contracts would allow them to sign 4 Caicedos at 100 million pounds a pop, because all of the profits on a player sale goes into your FFP calculation straight away, but the cost of the player is spread over the life of the contract. So a £100 million deal for Caicedo on an 8-year contract is 12.5 million a year. So you got 4 Caicedos for it cost you 50 million. They sold Mount for 55. They're actually quids in, and it sounds absolutely daft, but that's the way the system works. And I think Newcastle United have got people at the top who are smart enough to know how the system works. But you've got to look at, yes, you've got players coming through. You've got to invest in your academy, and you've got to, and it's a horrible thing, you've got to view the academy as a money-making machine, because that's what Chelsea do, and that's what Manchester City do. Manchester City sold 4 players last summer to Southampton for 40 million. I'd never heard of any of them. I suspect you hadn't either. But it's and they just sold this young lad to Chelsea for what, 40 million. And he's got 3 appearances.
You touched on obviously selling players, and I think we spoke about on this channel as well. I mentioned it a few times about how good Chelsea are as sellers, and this is why they're able to spend the money they are. But there was a lot of talk around Newcastle United in the summer, and first off, there was Craig Hope saying we only had 70 million to spend, and a lot of people kind of laughing it off as we were kind of spending players spending money on players. But does that eat into the fact of how much it was needed that we needed to sell Alan St-Maximin in order to fund the spending this summer? Because, you know, Newcastle and people close to the club were saying that was the case, but a lot of us, and even us on this channel, when we were doing the transfer shows, we kind of to a point didn't believe it. Like how important and how crucial was that Alan St-Maximin signing, but also how does that 70 million budget that Craig Hope mentioned in the summer, how did that kind of work? Because he'd been told from his perspective that was what we were working to.
Yeah. I think you've got to treat these claims of such and such a budget with a huge pinch of salt, because when you recruit a player, what you're looking at is not the transfer fee, but the cost to the club of employing that player for this season. Now, the cost to the club is going to be two things. First of all, it's going to be the wages. And secondly, it's going to be the amortization of the transfer fee. So if you start signing players on 6 and 7 year contracts, that gives you slightly more wiggle room. But if the players turn out to be turkeys, then the problem you've got, you're lumbered for 6 or 7 years. So it's a trade off. It's a huge gamble. And you know, if you think that Chelsea signed Lukaku for 97.5 million, and yeah, that was on a 5 year deal, and he's on ridiculous wages. Why is he not signed for anybody else? You know, this is his third season out on loan, because nobody's prepared to match his wages. Now, Newcastle, I don't think they want to be in that position, because for all Chelsea's faults, they've got the benefit of being in London, able to charge London prices. They've got the benefit of a very high UEFA coefficient and so on. I take this figure of 70 million with a pinch of salt, because if you do sell even a couple of youth players, and also, you know, for all of our, you know, I know a bloke that knows a bloke that knows a bloke, we haven't got a clue as to the wages that individual players are coming on. So, you know, some will be on, you know, 5 million, 6 million, 7 million a year, but we're doing an awful lot of guesswork with regards to that. And it's exactly the same with the Adidas deal and the Samer deal and the Noon deal and so on. We're getting figures that are being quoted to us. They could be 3 or 4 million higher or 3 or 4 million lower. So you have to treat them with a dose of salt. And what about those players whose contracts expired in June 22 and June 23? Because you forget about those players immediately. Because football's a game. It's an industry which is geared towards short-term things. And you know, when I point out to Manchester United fans are saying, "Oh, you know, the problem's the manager, and we want Ronaldo back," I says, "Well, I remember Brighton beating Manchester United 4-0 with Ronaldo in the side, and he spent most of the match with his, you know, with traditional Ronaldo pose, hands on hips, looking sulky." So, you know, memories and football is one of my biggest concerns. We've all got very short memories, and people are forgetting what's actually happened over the course. And remember, FFP is a 3-year operation. They've forgotten what's happened in year -1 and year -2.
Kieran, I don't know how many times you would say FFP every day of your life, but Elisa has a great question here, and it says, a question for Kieran: with the fines for breaking FFP appearing to be so minimal, what is the point in keeping to them?
Okay. There are quite a few. If you take a look at the UEFA website and you look at some of the rulings, we are seeing some clubs taking 1-year bans. They tend to be, I mean, Juventus this year have taken a voluntary ban from European football. And that's because they got a 10 points deduction, which meant that they didn't qualify for the Champions League. And we saw this with Milan. And I don't want to go and enforce stereotypes here, because it's completely inappropriate. But we've seen the Italian clubs in particular, is that when they qualify for the Europa Conference or the UEFA Conference, they say, "Oh, we've breached financial fair play. We're handing ourselves in." And instead of risking a 2-year ban from European football when they're in the Champions League, they take a 1-year ban from a year in which they're in the conference, in which they probably lose money. So yeah, there's an awful lot of trading taking place. But as far as breaches in the Premier League are concerned, we've not seen anything yet. but I suspect they will be geared towards points deductions rather than fines and so on. And if you talk to fans of Derby County or Wigan, or I mean, Reading have had 16 points taken away. We've seen I think Southend or Scunthorpe, Southend have had a points deduction as well. So whilst it's in the lower leagues and it's not part of our focus, because you're a Premier League club, it is happening elsewhere. And it is happening. It's happening in Italy. We are seeing clubs being banned in Europe in the minor competitions. But I
Kieran,
think
why is it not happening in the Premier League though? And I think this is one thing because obviously Everton have been in dire straits drastically over the last few years, and they know that they should have had points deductions. Why are the Premier League not? Are the others too scared to do it, or what do you think?
Well, both Manchester City and Everton are up on charges at present. So we have to await due process. Now, if you are a club with, in Manchester City's case, it's a £600 million a year club in terms of revenue. In Newcastle's, it's 200. You can afford to pay lawyers and accountants appropriately. And the Premier League wants to get the Premier League is looking for an example. It's looking for a points deduction because the Premier League is opposed to the independent regulator. And the way that it feels it can achieve that is that it says, well, look, we've got our own house in order because we are prosecuting our own teams and we are giving them points deductions, and therefore self-regulation works and the independent regulator is not needed. So the Premier League is looking at these things forensically. It is trying to ensure that when the announcements are made in respect of both Manchester City and Everton, that their case is as watertight as possible to try to get a ruling in their favour. There's a much broader political debate taking place between the Premier League and the government than people realise.
Just the last one. Oh, sorry, Peter. Do you want a quick one before we?
No, it was with the Everton point. So I was going to make that point as well. Is because they've been fighting relegation now for 2 years, and it was during their first relegation stint in which it all kind of came to a head, and their finances came to a head. It was a season when they had Rafa Benitez in charge, and it was all a bit all over the place. And everyone then, there was reports of they were going to get points deducted and all the rest of it, and it just goes quiet. And I think for us as fans, we just think because things are not being actioned there and then, and they're being given another year to go and spend money, because they did spend money in the next season after that, and then they've spent money again. And it's like, well, if you're continuing to break the rules and you're, exceeding FFP, but yet you're still able to spend, fans like us are thinking, well, how is that fair? How is that fair when our club is being restricted and we have the money? This is our frustration as Newcastle fans. We have the money with our owners to spend, and we would spend it in the right way. And we've got the money to put down and back that up, but we're not allowed to. But they've broken the rules effectively, and like you said, they've been charged for it. But yet they're able to still spend, maybe not the money that they would like to, but still being able to spend.
Not just that, Pete. Also,
the process just takes too long for me. The process
not just
is
that, Pete.
long.
Pete, also the teams that got relegated instead of what Everton really should have, if they had the points deductions gone through in that season. But obviously you look at Burnley going down. There's teams that went down last year as well who technically possibly could, and then they lose out on their revenues and stuff like that as well. And then there's more legal stuff to go through on that one as well. So it's an interesting one, isn't it, really? But Kieran, just a quick one before I let you go. You did put a tweet out about this, and it's the second time Newcastle have done this. They issued a share for 60 million. Do you have any ideas what this is about? Because obviously, as I said, it's the second time they've done it. The last time I think it was 60 million £1 shares the last time, wasn't it? And obviously, you talked about it in your podcast this week. Obviously, a few fans were querying, what's that? That revenue going to be? What is it for? Is it just for work and overheads type things and stuff like that, or for stuff for infrastructure that doesn't go against it? Obviously the training ground had to be paid for. So what do you think that's actually going to be for?
Well, again, if we go back to word of the day, which is FFP, is that many people, I think, fall into the trap of thinking that all Premier League football clubs are allowed to lose £105 million over a 3-year period. And that is not the case. You're only allowed to lose 15 million over 3 years. And yeah, we got the adjustments for infrastructure spend and academy spend and women's football and community schemes and all of the sort of, what you might call the virtues in football, the things which we want to encourage on a much broader level as part of the football club's commitment to the local community. But the owners are then allowed to top up those £15 million losses with £90 million over 3 years, provided it's in the form of shares rather than loans. So that £60 million actually goes into Newcastle United's FFP calculation. The second issue is that it's physical cash, and Newcastle United is consuming more cash than it's generating at present. Because if you take a look at the accounts, the club at the end of 2021, Ashley, he knew that the club was effectively up for sale. So Newcastle hadn't been spending a huge amount in the window, but Mike Ashley's style of buying players was that he tended to pay the whole amount immediately. Now, what we're seeing under PIF, because Newcastle spent £150 million in 21-22, they've now moved into sort of a similar structure to what we see in other clubs, where players are being acquired in installments. So Newcastle United actually owe 75 million on players that you signed in 21-22. And that 75 million is on top of whatever they've been buying during the summer of 23. So you see how much money the cash that the club physically requires to pay not just for this year's installments, but last year's installments and so on. And that tops up. And then you've got players coming in on big wages. The things that which we have been talking about, the extra money coming from St James's Park, which is sold out every week, which has got people willing to come and spend more money. You've got more matches from the Champions League. That really hasn't started to materialise yet. So therefore, you need the owners to put that money in now to allow the cash flow. There is one other club in the Premier League which has an owner which has stopped putting money in, it would appear, and that club has got an awful lot of cash issues.
Kieran, we know we've extended your time over. We obviously you were wanting to do and stuff like that. There was just so much we had to cram in pretty much over the whole of this financial year. And obviously we tried to get in over the summer, but obviously you're inundated now with public appearances and interviews because you're the man to go to, and we appreciate that you've spared this time. It was on a Sunday night as well. So I'd just like to say on behalf of Daz, Pete, myself, Chris as well, and everyone who's tuned in to watch and ask the questions, we really appreciate it, and would love to have you on again in the future. But obviously, we do have to say, obviously, Brighton this weekend. So on Thursday night, Europa League. Are you happy, excited? And
I'm delirious. I'm absolutely delirious. We're playing AEK Athens. We've never played in Europe before. I'm not going to get the violins out, but I remember the 4-0 home defeat to Darlington. I remember sort of just being slaughtered every week, being 12 points adrift at the bottom of League Two. And I'm going to be really emotional. I'll be sobbing my eyes out because this was never on the agenda. We were hoping to get to the Championship, and now we're playing in European football, and we're playing two teams that have previously won the European Cup. I'm just so happy.
Yeah. I think we can all emphasise and relate to that. Obviously, both Europe, obviously your first time in Europe, we're returned to the Champions League after 20 years. It's going to be a fantastic week for both clubs.
And savour the moment. Love every second of it.
We will. I
Kieran,
go on, Dan.
Just a quick one. I want to ask you a question here about your new book. This is your chance to plug the book. I hope Newcastle don't appear in a chapter here in this book, do they?
Well, Mike Ashley might.
That's okay.
What I'll try and do, I'll try and get myself and Kevin to come back if you want to have a chat about it.
Yeah.
It's and we're not here to try to sell books, but I honestly, for people not familiar, Kevin's a stand-up comedian. I do a podcast with him twice a week. He's absolutely brilliant, and loads of people have said to us, all that you do, it's easy for you. You sit in your homes and you snipe away at club owners. You bet you couldn't do it yourself, and we know that. But what we thought we'd do, we'd write a book where we pretend. So we're going to take a club from park football to the Champions League, and along that route, Kevin is a very, very funny writer. All the boring bits I've written.
Well, Donald is currently reading The Price of Football, and he's recommending it there. So yes, why not? You're always welcome back on the channel, Kieran, anytime.
Thank you very much, lads, and have a great European adventure this year. And we'll have a final, and you'll have a final next May, and we'll be all celebrating together.
Could be the same final, yes.
We wish.
No.
Kieran, as I said, thank you very much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you soon.
All the best, guys. Keep up the great work.
Take care, Kieran.
Okay, mate.
Thanks, Kieran.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, lads, look, we for the viewers who know that we only had half an hour with Kieran, and Kieran's he's fantastic. He's given us that extra time there because there was just so much to go through. We apologise that we couldn't get to every single viewer question. I know Daz has starred quite a few, some really good ones. I knew there's going to be possibly a few overlaps in there as well of what we had lined up. But Daz, Pete, what did you make of the stuff that Kieran had to tell us tonight about where we're going commercially and financially?
Always interesting, Richie, and with trying to keep up with the questions, I always have to watch these shows back again with Kieran because I miss some of the detail. But no, always delighted to get them on. And as you said, we know at the start of the summer you started chasing Kieran, and we've got him now. So we've all had to go and try to chase Kieran. So just delighted, and apologies we didn't get to all the questions. We just tried to pick some of them that linked into the conversation because, as Richie said, we only had he said 30 minutes, so we got nearly the hour with him, so that was great.
Pete, what did you make of it? Was there anything that you took out of that you weren't aware of or anything like that? Or
no, not really, because it's such a hot topic at the moment. A lot of people have been talking about it, so it's been the topic of conversation. So there's not anything that I was kind of surprised about. I just think it just confirmed a few things in terms of where we're going, in terms of the sponsors and what it may allow us to spend. Just little things about what we could do to improve spending and improve things are in and around the club. It's always a fantastic listen, and people in the chat. I saw a comment of on Stu saying he loves how he breaks things down, and this is why it's such a fantastic listen, because he does break things down and just makes it really kind of simple and easy to understand. Because look, I'm not a financial guy. I don't know everything about what goes in football. I don't think any of us are. But with the way that modern football is moving right now, it's kind of like you do need to know a little bit about it, because it does have an implication of what happens on certain clubs. We talked about Chelsea, we talked about Everton. We all had questions about both of those clubs, about their relevant spending, and he was able to shore that up very, very quickly. So this is why we love him on.
Yeah, and as I said, it's a fantastic show, and it's the first show of the night. We've got another one coming up in half an hour. Pete, do you want to plug what's coming up in half an hour?
I certainly can, and you know what? We may even bring it forward slightly, so hold on to that just for a second. First of all, yes, Adam, I'm not a maths teacher. I stay far away from maths as much as possible, because I do not like maths whatsoever. Not my expertise, but we're back. And we're back with a new show. The Away Days are bringing a Champions League edition. So we are delighted to bring the Milan Weekly podcast to us. Vinny's going to be joining us very, very shortly to talk all things Newcastle United and AC Milan. And he has already given me the heads up to go easy on him when we're looking at past results after what happened last night.
Yesterday.
So I did say we would brush past it. We're not. But we'll talk about it a little bit, as well as looking at, the tactics, the lineup, who he thinks is going to start on Tuesday. I'm going to be asking Chris and Keith who they think is going to be starting on Tuesday. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation on that. People are on social media are already having those conversations. So really looking forward to it. And Keith's coming with some European stats. So
never disappoints.
Should be a very, very interesting watch. So looking forward to getting it going. So scheduled at 9:30, but guys, keep an eye on that because that might move slightly further forward.
Yeah, just remember, if you liked and subscribed already to the channel, you will get a notification when it goes live. So just wait for that notification. It is to go off any earlier. But as you know, it's 9:00 now. We're going to round up this show, and then obviously we'll get on to away days anytime between 15 minutes to half an hour type thing. Dad's going to see us out with the sponsors, and then we'll get going.
Yeah, let's do so. And just a reminder, if you hadn't seen our reaction show last night as well, that was there for your pleasure whenever you want to view that. It's about an hour and a half long, but it's all happy, it's smiley faces for a change. Has been a while since we had that. So yeah, quick shout out to our sponsors. Shout out to the radiatorshed.com as we put Pete in jail, and look at the lovely radiators that are available from Russ, and you all know them by now. And that is him there. That's Russ. And here is the install works as well if you need to get those radiators installed via the loaded van. Russ will travel in. And also a shout out to H2O Bathroom Design Co., the Northeast's largest supplier of Velcro and Botch bathroomware. Team Valley Gateshead, over 20 years established, run by the family. Get down to the showroom on 11th Avenue, Team Valley Estate, Gateshead. And you know already all the bathrooms that are there. So yeah, check those out if you're in the need of upgrading your bathroom or your radiators, or someone's building a house. So yeah, that's a quick shout out to the sponsors. Thanks for everyone in the chat tonight. Thanks for Kieran again for coming on with us. Richie, make sure you get onto away days as well. The first of the European adventure. But yeah, Richie, say those magic words.
How do you like that? Good night, everyone.
How do you like that? Good night.
Drink it, like weed and tell me if you like that.